Hello everyone, welcome to your partner in education, Agile Rank Mate. Today, in this episode of Know Your NMAT, we're going to be looking at some sample questions with solutions from the NMAT exam. Today we're going to be looking at logical reasoning because that's the main subject which will be asked in NMATs. So let's start off, shall we? Here comes our first question. This was again from Quantitative Skills. Sumit spends 10% of his salary on his child's education, 20% of the remainder on rent, and 25% of the balance on garments. Finally, he's left with $5,400. What is his salary? So over here, we need to find out the salary based on the expenditure and the remainder that is left with him. So let's look at this question. All right. So let's consider the total salary to be X. Now, the first thing that Sumit does is he spends 10% of his salary on his child's education. So for education, the salary, the amount given is 10% of his salary, which is equal to 0.1x. So what would be the remainder? The balance that he still has would be x minus 0.1x, which is equal to 0.9x. Now this is the amount that he has. Now using this amount, he spent 20% of 0.9x on rent. So for rent, the amount that he gave is 20 by 100 into 0.9x. 20 by 100 is the same thing as 1/5. So 0.9 over 5 x is the amount of rent that he paid. So 90 over 5 gives you 18, so 0.9 over 5 gives you 0.18. So Sumit spends 0.18x on rent. So again, if we deduct that from the money that he has, so therefore the balance now would be 0.9 minus 0.18. 90 minus 18 gives you 72, so it'll be 0.72x. So he now has 72% of his balance with him. So now from 0.72x, he spends 25% of 0.72x on garments. So now for garments, he will now spend 25%. So that's 25 by 100 times 0.72x. 25 by 100 is the same thing as 1/4. So therefore 1/4 of 0.72 is equal to 0.18x. So 18 times 4 is 72, so that's how 25% of 0.72x is 0.18x again. So now the balance that he has is 0.72 minus 0.18. So 12 minus 8 gives you 4. 6 minus 1 gives you 5. So therefore 0.54x is the balance that he has. So he has 54% of his salary with him after all of his expenditures. Now in the question, it's given that he's left with $5,400, which is the same thing as 0.54x. So that means if we were to multiply both sides by 100, we will get 54x equals to 540000, which is basically $540,000. So the value of x is 540,000 over 54. So the 54s get cancelled from both sides. So finally what we get is $10,000. So Sumit's salary that he spends on his child's education, rent, and garments amounts to a total of $10,000. So therefore option A, $10,000, is the right answer. If you were to look at the other options, then the remainder would not be equal to 5,400. So 54% of X is what we need to calculate for all of these. If you do that, you'll notice that they're not equal to $5,400. So therefore option A is the right option. Now, let's look at another question. A dishonest dealer claims to sell his goods at 20% discount, but uses a weight of 800 grams for weighing 1 kilogram of goods. Now, find out the profit or loss being made by the dealer. So, there are two things we need to think of. One, since we're using a percentage term, we will try to write the cost in terms of $100. So let's consider 1 kg of goods is worth $100 as its cost price. Which brings us to the second thing which we need to look at is cost price and selling price. So a dealer buys stuff using the cost price, and then depending on whether he gives a discount or whether he hikes it because of other expenses, you either get a higher or lower price when you buy from the dealer. So therefore that's called the selling price. Now what does this dealer do? We call him dishonest because for weighing 1 kilogram of goods, he uses a weight of 800 grams. So when we consider 1 kilogram to be approximately worth $100, then for 800 grams, it'll be 80% of $100, which is $80. So the cost price of the amount of goods that he sells, considering to be 1 kilogram, is $80. So if this goes over your head, here's the idea. The dealer is said to be dishonest, which means that he's not doing something correctly. So in order to get maximum money out of it, instead of weighing 1 kilogram to people, he uses a weight of 800 and tells them that it's equal to 1 kilogram. So basically, he sells 800 grams of the goods instead of 1 kilogram. So his cost price will be considering his cost price, which we're looking at, has to be calculated for 800 grams because that's the amount of goods that he's going to sell. That's the amount of goods that he's going to buy, and then he's going to sell. So therefore, he buys 800 grams worth of goods at $80. So that's the first part. The second part is he claims to sell his goods at 20% discount. Now, the 20% discount is for his selling price. So let's consider that he wasn't dishonest. So he actually gave his goods at 20%. So 20% discount means that the consumer has to pay 80% money for 1 kilogram, which basically is 80 by 100 times $100, which is equal to, again, $80. So now the selling price that the consumer gets from him is, the consumer gives him $80 for 800 grams of goods. However, they don't know that it's 800 grams. They think of it as 1 kilogram, and they think that they've got a 20% discount. So as you can see, for 800 grams of goods that the dealer sells dishonestly, he buys it at $80, and he also sells it at $80, claiming that there is a 20% discount for 1 kilograms. So therefore, basically, you can see that the amount for the cost price is equal to the amount for the selling price. So when CP is equal to SP, then there is no net profit or loss. So therefore, option C, no profit or loss, is the right answer. All the other options are incorrect because for a 40% loss or a 10% profit to happen, either this cost price should be greater for a loss or the selling price should be greater for a profit. In this particular case, even after he's being dishonest, he still doesn't get a profit or loss. It's basically break even at this stage. So The idea here is we are taking two separate scenarios. The first scenario is finding out the amount of money that's required for 800 grams, which is basically its cost price, and then finding out how much does a 20% discount look like on 1 kilogram, which is again $80. So as you can see, in both cases, the amount of money stays the same, so the cost price is equal to the selling price, so there is no net profit or loss. So option C is the right option. Now that concludes this episode of Know Your NMAT. We hope you found it interesting. For more of our useful and interesting content, don't forget to subscribe to Agile Rank Mate, your partner in education. If you want to get the latest updates from our channel regarding NMAT or other examinations, then please don't forget to hit the bell icon present below the video. So until the next webisode, take care, stay alert, bye-bye for now.